what that element is like. In animation, we have to create everything, right? There's nothing you get for free. You can't just go onto a set and have the light come in a nice way, or just start snowing outside accidentally and you get a beautiful shot. If it's going to snow, we have to create every snowflake. If there's a light coming through a window, we have to think to put it there. If there's a blade of grass or a little mote of dust in the air, even in Ren's thing, you can see the light coming in the top of her screen and it's kind of blowing out. Like, we have to put the lights to blow out and create that. All of that stuff is created. Like, nothing is really, so it's a lot more planning and therefore it's a lot more expensive. So we have to make sure everything we make is something we need. We can't just shoot. So if we're making an 1.5 hour movie, we try to make an 1.5 hour worth of material. If you're shooting a 1.5 hour live action movie, you probably shoot 300 hours of footage and then edit it down. So we only shoot what we need. In live action, you get all kinds of coverage and then build your movie afterwards.
So obviously very, very detailed. So how would you, is there an approximation of, say, on Spies in Disguise, overall, how many people were involved in the creation of that movie?
That's awesome. So Spies in Disguise started with just me and my co-director and a writer. So we started with 3 people and obviously our executives. At our largest sort of portion in studio Blue Sky, we had 578 people, I think, working at one time. So you've got quite a few, and that's just in the production of it. But then to make a movie, you've got to have people who are also working at the same time to what's the marketing going to be and how are we going to get it to theaters and how are we going to get people to go see it. So then you've got that big group. And then over here, you've got, well, we should make some lunch boxes and some t-shirts. And so that's your consumer products group. So they're working at the same time. And then you've got your home video. So you've got the people making the movie, and what a lot of people think of at the same time, you've got all these other businesses that are running at the same time alongside of you. So there was easily over 1,000 people at certain points, just in all these different areas, all working to bring something like Spies Disguise out. It's a big endeavor.
The questions are starting to come in. So Emily, I see your question on that, and that's going to be one for holding on to that one. Very good one. Sam is asking that, well, also, I mean, I believe you're aware, Rachel, Zach, Joe here, we have so many amazing artists, Munchie himself, here at the theater. And do you have any advice for, I just lost your question. Do you have any advice for young artists who are interested in working in your industry?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the first thing to do is, it sounds so cliche, but keep drawing, keep creating art. It's so important to just keep challenging, because that's how you get better. We used to have the saying, you have to do 1,000 bad drawings to get to your first good one. And that's not necessarily true. You might do a great one right out of the gate, but really the idea is just every time you do it, you learn something, you get more comfortable with the materials, you get more comfortable with your craft. Observe. A huge part of art of any sort is just observation, right? It's watching, if you're drawing people, watching how people move, looking at anatomy, how the first thing you'll see is, a lot of times you'll see a character, from behind you, they're looking and their chin is over their shoulder. Well, there's very few people, unless you've got some double jointedness in your spine, can get your chin past your shoulder, right? So your first instinct may be to draw like that, going, oh, this character's looking over her shoulder. But once you realize that that's actually not a possibility, so observing, that way, if you decide to do that, then it's a creative choice as opposed to not understanding. So observation is a huge thing. It's art galleries. I used to love going to art galleries and just looking at paintings, just seeing how artists capture light, because light changes the color of everything. Light changes how we feel about different things. A different tone of light. Like, if you're drawing something and someone's standing outside at night with a street light on, right? Is it a halogen light, which is a really cold blue, crisp light that creates really sharp shadows, or is it a sodium light like you'd see in London or older cities, which has got like a real yellow tinge, which makes you feel spooky and like something ominous is about to, like all these things. So it's observing, seeing what all those different things do, how you feel about it, and then once you know that, then you know how to execute it and how to capture that. And so I'd say just keep practicing. Storyboarding specifically for people who are interested in, like, so that's like the art side, which is the design side. Storyboarding, a great thing is watching movies, which is a great thing for this group. Watch movies. Follow, like, what something we would always tell students is watch your favorite movie. It's easy to freeze frame now. It was a lot harder back in the days of VCRs, but take a shot, freeze frame it, and then sketch out where the characters are placed and the composition of that frame, right? Like, and then go to the next cut and freeze frame and draw that. So what you end up doing is, out of a scene, you got all these little thumbnails of how that scene, and you can look at the composition and you start to understand why the director and the cinematographer chose those compositions, where your eye goes. Like, all these things are important to just keep practicing, keep learning about. Yeah, and keep actually
Excellent
doing it.
advice. Cubby has asked, he prepared so many questions for you, Cubby. You did such a great job. First and foremost, how did the idea for Spies in Disguise come around, and how did the writing process go?
So the idea for Spies in Disguise originally it was a short film done by an artist named Kevin Martell, who just, like I just said, just had an idea and said, I'm gonna do it, and just drew it out, and then had a little computer animation that he did of it. The short, if you've seen it, really has nothing to do with how the movie turned out, but it was definitely that inspiration point that the studio said, oh, there's a pigeon and a spy. Yeah, I'm sure there's a movie about that somewhere. So they sort of buy the idea, and then they put it on a shelf and say, we'll do something with that at some point. I came on the project, and I love spy movies. You know, the James Bond marathons that come on, the Mission Impossibles, the Bourne. Like, I love the genre of spy movies. So when I had a friend who was an executive there, who said, oh, we've got this spy movie that's been sitting on a shelf for 10 years. I'm like, a spy movie? Like, I would love to make a spy. I would love to make a Bond movie, but I'm not English. So I will never get the chance to direct a Bond movie because they only hired English directors. So it was a chance to sort of make a movie that I was a fan of. Because at the end of the day, I think that's most people are. We're just all fans. Like, we love, you know, what we love, and you're passionate about it. And making movies is such a huge job. You really have to love it and be a fan of it, because it's a marathon. These things, like a Spies in Skies, took just by the time from when I started to when I finished, just over 5 years. But we were actively working on it for just around 4 of those years. So it takes a long time to put together a lot of those.
Wow. So Cubby, I'll come back to your other one. So Juliana has a two-parter. So the favorite part of your job and some of the challenges of your job.
The favorite part of there's so many. It's funny because I'm lucky enough that I get to see the movie at different stages. So when I'm writing, I love the idea of, like, just finding the right words to convey the experience. When you're reading it, you're feeling the action, and also, like, writing is also a creative talent. Not just putting words down, but like doing short, quick sentences makes it feel very active, like you're writing an action scene. Using a lot longer, fluid, sort of floaty sentences makes you feel calmer. So even the creative nature of how you put words down. So you get really excited and you go, oh, I can picture this movie in my head. And that seems really exciting, until you go, oh, I can't write another page because I just can't do this anymore. And then somebody shows you a sequence storyboard, and you're like, oh, right, I forgot this wasn't gonna be written. It's gonna be visuals. And then you start working in storyboards, and you're like, oh, this is exciting, and I like this cut, and I like this, until you go, oh, I can't look at any more storyboards anymore. And then all of a sudden, someone shows you a scene of animation. You're like, oh, right, this is gonna move. And that's so exciting. And now it's moving. This is great, until you're in like 8 hours of sweatbox, which is what we call animation meetings. And you're like, I can't sit in a dark room any longer, until someone shows you a scene lit. And you're like, oh, right, this is gonna be in color. So you get to sort of keep getting excited about different things, because there's so many stages that get involved. So it's really hard to pick one thing. But it's just the journey of getting through it. But there is something super exciting about the lighting phase, because it changes so much, and it does so much storytelling by just where you place a light, how you light something. It's where things really sort of come alive. It's exciting.
What's that noise?
I don't know, Rachel. So, Emily was interested in your role as a director, and also, would you say is the difference between a director of an animated movie, or is there, versus a director of a non-animated movie?
Called live action.
Yeah, those are good. That's a great question. So I'll
Oh.
start with that part of it. And the difference between a director of an animated movie and a live action movie is there isn't any. It's
No.
the same job. Your job is there to have a vision for a movie, to pull in the best talent you can to help support that, to understand your vision, and your job is to sort of very much protect and shepherd that vision forward, and just boss people around a lot. But how you get a movie is very different between live action and animation. But that's why you'll see it's a lot less different now with the advent of like visual effects. Like you watch a Marvel movie, and 4 or 5 reels out of the 8 reels of that movie are probably 90% created computer. So that's very much what we do in animation. So there's those lines are starting to blend a lot. But my job as a director is, I talk something into existence, because like I said, there's 560 people helping me do what I do. My job is to have a clear idea of who the characters are, what they want, and how do I bring the audience along on that journey to understand that. When do I give them information? When do I hold it back so they lean in a little bit? And then when do I surprise them so they all jump and laugh, and like when do you build tension? When do you release it? So my job is just to keep an eye on all those moving parts, because all the people, the animators are focused on their scene, the designers are focused on making things look right, the lighters are focused on making sure the color's right, and my job is just to make sure that overall everyone's pulling the same direction, and you don't get people pulling away from the story you're trying to tell.
Well, I have the name for your TED Talk. It should be I talk things into existence.
Right, there you go.
A title for a talk.
I love there you go.
No.
Ren would like to know how you combat writer's block.
That's a great question. With a lot of tears usually. No, right. I mean, there's when things are going well, and I'd find like when I'm writing or when I was storyboarding, especially when I was storyboarding, because I was getting the visual, you get to a point where all of a sudden the character does something or says something. You're like, that's so weird. Why would they do that? Which sounds really weird because you're the one writing it or creating it, but you realize you just got into a zone where you understand the character to a point where they're doing things. It feels like they're just, of course they're going to do that because you know them so well. And then you hit those points where you're like, nothing makes sense, nothing's connecting. The best thing to do is just to get away from it when you can. It's nice if you could just put it in a drawer and go away for a week and come back to it, and all of a sudden you see it from a different perspective. And that's really is about changing perspective. I find is the easiest thing. I'll go for a run. Me personally, I'll go for a run and I'll be miserable for the first mile, and then all of a sudden I'll get caught up in like, oh wait, that's how I'll do that. But the change of perspective is an interesting, like anybody who's done drawings. So it's something we would learn in life drawing. You'd look at the model and you do your drawing, and you go, does this look right? The trick is you turn around and you hold it up into a mirror. I don't know if anybody knows that trick, because what it shows you when you're looking in a mirror is you see where all your perspective is off and your structure's off. It's changing your perspective, right? Because your brain is such an amazingly powerful tool. It'll fill in gaps that you don't realize it's filling in on you until you trick it by shifting your perspective. So that's why if you can go for a run or go for a walk or just do something that's not what you're doing and then come back to it, you tend to come back with a slightly different perspective, and you can see where those problems are and where those bumps are. And then the other side of that is, I mean, this seems like a very excited group and people who were passionate about films and creativity. find other people. I mean, it's a load that's easier carried with the help of others. So sometimes you'll just go, I don't understand. I can't figure out how to get past this part. And someone else will go, why don't you just have them do that? And you're like, first you get upset and you get, why didn't I think of that? And then you go, thank you very much. Because it helps you just, again, you just need a different perspective than what you get caught up in. So find other people who are creative, who are passionate about the same things you are, and share with them, because that's really helpful.
Accomplish it with more people.
Wendy, you have a question, Wendy?
Yeah, how long did you work in Blue Sky? Like, how long did you work there for?
I came to Blue Sky in 2014. So I've been there, it'll be 7 years in March.
Ooh.
Before that, I was in LA. I was in LA for 6 years. And then before that, I was back in Toronto, which is where I started my career, up in Toronto.
2014, since I was 26 years old.
Yeah.
Munchie's comment, I think many prospects, and it's very true, would be great voice actors too, in addition to their artistry skills. What advice would you give someone who wants to be a voiceover artist?
Oh, that's a great question. That is a good question. I mean, it's always good, like anything creative, it's good to have, we call them a demo reel or a reel. So there's examples of your work, right? You doing voiceover to something or doing readings. Voiceover is a very specific thing. There's, I mean, we don't really, I work with, there's actors and then there's voiceover artists, and that's a little bit of a different thing, and people may not realize that. So like on a movie like Spies, we'd go out and we'd reach out to an actor like Will Smith or Tom Holland, and then we'd work directly with them. And then we have like voice actor groups, which are like, you would go to a specific person who has a stable of voice actors that they bring together, and then they manage that, and you just work with them. And you do that for, so like in live action or even animation, like we call it Walla, right? Or loop group. And that's when you see a big scene of a city, right? And you hear all kinds of people, the monsters coming in the city, and you hear, there's a monster, all these people, the voices of the crowd. That's typically not recorded on the day. Typically on the day, you just record your leads, and all that stuff gets ADR'd. So after dub recording is what ADR stands for. You record all that stuff at a different point and then build it in so that it feels like all those people were running, screaming. And so, so there's two different types of acting that way. But acting is a very tricky gig. You have to have a very tough skin in acting. You have to, for as many times as you get accepted, a lot of people say, voice is too soft, voice is too sharp, like it's a tricky thing. But like anything else, if you love it, you just keep doing it. And
Diplomatic skills must definitely have be great. We did have a question about what was it like working with Will Smith and Tom Holland?
I actually wanted to ask about that as well.
Yeah, they're amazing. I mean, they really were super collaborative, super positive, super funny. I have to say, you're always nervous. You never know. The person on screen is not always the person in person, and so you're always nervous, but you cast what's best for the character. And they were both super collaborative, and it was very interesting, sort of getting two very big actors at completely different stages. Like when we cast Tom, Civil War had just come out, so he had just sort of exploded onto the scene, but wasn't as huge as he's become since. And Will Smith is Will Smith. He's super talented.
Lance Sterling.
He's Lance Sterling, exactly. He absolutely was. But they're both very genuine. Like those are two actors who I'm happy to say are very much everything you hope they would be. They are. But when you work with a star of like Will Smith's caliber, they carry a lot of weight, right? So they have opinions, and because they're such big names, the studios are very listen to those opinions, and that can get complicated when you're trying to make something. And if they have a different idea of what that thing is, it gets to be a little bit of a challenge. But luckily, Will's a great communicator, and we had a really good relationship, so we never ran into that problem. But I have been on movies or have friends who've made movies where that has become a problem, and it gets to be a tricky one. So, but yeah.
Ryan Wenke would like to know, and I'm sure you've definitely have been asked this question. From a director's perspective, what are your thoughts on movies skipping theatrical and going straight to streaming? Do you feel a bit of the magic is lost when these wonderful films, especially animated ones, are viewed on laptops and home TVs instead of on the big screen? Do you see directors, actors, artists having a voice in how their films are released in a post-pandemic industry?
That is a spectacularly relevant question right now. And the honest answer is multifaceted. I wish I could just say one answer, but here's my honest answer is I love the romance of the cinema. I loved getting lost as a kid in a theater and just watching something larger than life and being enveloped in it, and the communal experience of being in a theater changes how you interact with it. Like you may watch a movie at home that's a comedy and go, oh, that was really funny, but you watch in a theater, you find yourself laughing out loud because this person over here laughs. Oh, that is funny, and you sort of feed off that energy, and it's just a different experience. So I got into making movies. Like I have lots of friends who stayed in television, and I had options in television, but I loved the cinema. So for me, it was all about theater. So I am on the team of being crushed at the idea, like of something skipping. I mean, for me, like the current movie I'm making, I'm hoping we've got a theatrical release coming up, but I don't know, because that control is not with the filmmakers. That's with the people who pay for the films, which are the studios, and they have to look at how they're going to. It is a business. They got to look at how they're going to keep that business and keep people seeing it. Because the other side of being a filmmaker and working all this time and putting all your passion and your love into something, you want people to see it. Like, it doesn't do me any good to make the movie I want to make and no one watches it. So the other side of that is wanting to make sure the most eyes that can possibly see it get a chance to see it. So it is it's not an easy answer, because I want people to watch my movies, but I would love to have them watch it the way I meant to, because you frame for things differently when you're thinking of scale, right? Like part of what we were talking about earlier about like advice for artists, and if you want to get into storyboarding, if you watch a TV show and you do your little thumbnails, and then you watch a movie and you do, what you'll notice is in film, you'll get a lot more long shots, a lot more wide shots, because you've got scale to work in your favor. You can put Luke Skywalker this small with a giant sky and two suns, because you can take in all that. But on TV, you'll find a lot more medium to close-up shots because the screen is smaller. So you won't get the subtlety of performance if you're too far away. So there's just different things you approach it in different ways. But yeah, there's a group of directors who are definitely, and the Chris Nolans and they're all fighting the good fight for the big screen. And I like to believe that there will always be room for that. There'll always be people who are going to want that. It's just too special of an experience. So I'm in the keep it in the theater side.
Yay. Santiago, I will please ask your question. I will not do those amazing creators justice by saying their names in Spanish. So if you could please ask both your questions that you have. Yep, you're gonna unmute Santiago.
Hello.
There you are. You're on.
I don't see
Hello?
it,
Are you there?
Yep, we can hear you, Santiago.
but we can't see
Okay.
it.
Hold on one sec. Let me just clean my. I have a question. Do you know who Juan Padron is, the famous Cuban animator? He met John Lasseter, the famous the creator of Pixar. He's a Cuban animator. He died recently. He died in March of 2020.
Oh no, the name sounds familiar, but I've never met him personally, and I'm not familiar with his work, but I obviously know who John Lasseter is. But it's there's a lot of really amazing. That's one thing that's great about animation, is it is such an international and global group of artists from all over. So,
Do you know who Hayao Miyazaki is? Hayao Miyazaki, the
oh
Japanese animator.
yes, yeah, absolutely. Kiki's Delivery Service, and
Yeah, I
they're
love his movies. Yeah.
so great.
Do
Yeah.
you know who else? Do you know who I forget. There's so many animators. I don't know. There's so many.
Endless.
There's quite a few, and they're all. I mean, there's a lot of really fantastic in animation. If you ever get a chance, Europe is very much
Oh yeah, I know.
for
Do
animation.
you, oh wait,
Animators in French.
do you know who Quirino Cristiani is? A famous Argentine animator. Quirino Cristiani.
No,
He's from Argentina. He's from Argentina. He met Walt Disney years ago.
Wow.
That's that's amazing. I do know a lot of animators from Argentina, but I don't know.
Speaking of which,
Morgan, another vastly talented artist, as an illustrator and painter myself. And Morgan, you should definitely, Troy, you should check out Morgan's artwork. It's phenomenal. All of this advice has been so cool and insightful. Which digital programs and/or traditional mediums are your favorite? And do you collect references, photos, drawings, art books, etc.?
Yeah, great question. So digital programs, I mean, industry standard for a lot of things is Photoshop, but you do get so many new things that we use a lot of paperless workflow now. So we'll use Photoshop, but we use Cintiq monitors, right? So that we are drawing right onto the monitor. The new iPads with the pencil is really great, in programs like Procreate. Like what you can do in Procreate for the cost of that app is, it's staggering. The technology is staggering for what it lets you accomplish now, and the way we used to have to sort of go about things. So I'd say, like, if you have access to an iPad and a pencil, an iPencil, like Procreate is a fantastic app, a really good price. Photoshop, like I said, is if you learn Photoshop, it's a pretty industry standard for art and painting and storyboarding and drawing. As far as like animation, Maya, I mean, is pretty standard. Most studios will have their own plugins or their own sort of in-house programs that they'll develop for animation and things like that. But I don't know a lot of animation programs, but I know there's a couple out there, and most of them nowadays are pretty accessible for people who are working from home. As far as collecting reference, it's you have to. I mean, like I was saying earlier, it's all about observation, right? And reference is part of that. So part of that is like when we made Spies in Disguise, I would have loved to take a trip to Venice, but that wasn't in our budget. So it was all about reference. It was artists in the studio who had taken trips there and had photographs, us looking at photographs for certain times a day, how the sunlight would hit the water and hit the buildings. So you're always gathering reference boards to create environments and situations that feel real or accessible to people. Because in animation, and we there's a famous Disney book called The Illusion of Life, and it was written by Frank Johnson and Ollie. They were two old school animators who sort of, that's what animation is. It's the illusion of life. We're trying to make people believe these characters exist. I mean, think about it. Next time you're in a Disney movie or Frozen or something, and you start crying, you just had a real emotional response to, in all honesty, something that isn't there. Like it's not a real person. It's a bunch of people coming together and creating the illusion of something, but your reaction to it is sincere and real. And it really is the most amazing magic trick possible. But to do that, there has to be truth, even in the most crazy imaginative things. It's about creating truth, right? We use that word, truth in performance, truth in a situation. I don't know what it's like to be a toy cowboy, who's friends with a space ranger, but I know what it's like to be afraid that my best friend may like somebody better than me.
oh,
And I know the mistakes I make trying to do so. That's a reality within an environment that I don't understand, but I know what that core truth is. So getting reference is always good for that. Reference from your own experience, reference from others, reference from the real world. And then I'll also, I mean, I'm also a fan of like art of books and painter, like artists workbooks and stuff like that, just for different styles. And I mean, that used to be a lot
Oh,
more,
now I see them. Those guys.
a lot more necessary. Now we've got the internet, which is a wonderful space to be able to find reference and inspiration. Back in the day, it was like you had to get the art books because that was your only access to these things. But yeah, always look for reference.
This is for, well, I just want to clarify for Ren, did Troy's talking, the software for that, does that, is that different, Troy, then? Because Ren also wants to know, are there useful softwares or tools that you use for creating your scripts,
Script?
storyboards and animations?
Yeah, so script writing software, I mean, obviously Final Draft is the one everyone knows about. But there's a couple others that you can find. I mean, Final Draft tends to be the sort of industry standard. If you're interested in script writing, I recommend looking at the website like John August, who's a major Hollywood screenwriter. He wrote Charlie and Chocolate Factory and Corpse Bride and a bunch of other ones. He has a podcast with Craig Mazin, who's another script writer. It is the most amazing free access film school podcast for anybody who wants to write. They talk about the writing industry, but they also talk about how to format things on a page properly. It's really fantastic. So he's also created his own script writing software app that you can get. So if you're interested in writing, I'd really recommend looking into John August and listening, because it's a really great resource. And what other thing there was writing and storyboarding we do in Photoshop. At the feature level, there is a storyboard software called, oh no, is it Storyboard Pro? I can look it up. I'll send Kathleen a couple options, but there is one that's sort of industry standard for television. It's that people tend to use a lot. We don't tend to use it, but in the features. But again, it really is whatever you can draw on. I mean, we used to draw with, I mean, when I was storyboarded, I started with a pad of paper and a Sharpie marker. It really is whatever you can do to create the imagery you need to get up on screen. I know people who storyboard in Procreate as well. So.
Munchie, given the nature of animation, production can still continue at home. Do you foresee a Hollywood where animated movies cross multiple genres and ages?
Yeah, I mean, the goal of animation in general is to cross as many age. I mean, you've probably heard the term 4-quadrant. I don't know if you've heard, that's studio speak for how they gauge. So it's usually you've got, 10 to 24-year-old male, 24 female, and then 25 and up and 25 and up male, female. So those are your 4 quadrants, right? So obviously you'll have the family movies, which are in the lower quadrant. Animation, they're always aiming for what they call 4-quadrant, which is a Pixar movie, right? You'll get families bringing their little kids, and then you'll have college students going on date nights. You'll have adults going because they just like the stories. So the more quadrants you can hit, the more people see your movie. So animation is always out to try and be as inclusive as possible for the most part. You're starting to see with like Netflix and Amazon, you're starting to see more of some of the Japanese anime and stuff, which has been more skewed towards adult only and specific audience. You're starting to see that come into a bit more acceptable in sort of a North American, European marketplace, where animation's always sort of been more for kids or for families. You're starting to see a little bit more of that adult level, sophisticated animation, which is exciting because animation isn't really a genre the way like a spy movie is a genre or a westerns are. It's a medium. It's simply, do you take a photograph of a beautiful sunset or do you paint a picture of a beautiful sunset, right? You're still capturing a beautiful sunset. It's just the medium you've chosen to do so. So we get very ornery in animation when people call it a genre, because it's not. You can tell all kinds of stories. And I mean, we try to do that with spies. We really try to lean into a spy genre. Like it's a little trickier making genre films in animation than like, because it takes so long. Like we had to reboot Spies a couple times because we had a villain, and then the new Mission Impossible comes out. And it's like, oh, that was our villain. And then, you know, you do another storyline, you go, great, we got this. And the new Bond comes out, and you're like, oh, all right, there's that. Like, because they can, I mean, in a live action movie will come out in 18 months to 2 years, and we're 3 to 4. Like we had Tom Holland. I'm sure anybody who is a fan of Spider-Man and watched Spies will go, it's weird how Tom went to Venice and fought drones in Spider-Man, even though we started that movie a year and a half before they started the second Spider-Man, but they can do it so much faster, and they came out first. Because I remember we'd be recording with Tom. He's like, "Oh, Venice, that's of course he couldn't say anything, but then you see the movie. Oh, but what are you going to do? So genre films and animation are a little trickier because you can't keep up at the same pace, but they're fun and they should be looked at like that.
So speaking of Spies in Disguise, I have some more cubby questions. So what made you decide on the main actors and actresses in the movie?
I actually wanted to.
That's great. Well, when we were thinking of Lance Sterling, I mean, we were just trying to think who were, when I think of hero, right? Someone who's larger than life, who's funny, but can be a real action star that you believe, and yet can still be kind of a challenging character portrayal, someone who needs to learn. That starts going to be a very small list of people who have got all of the, you got great action heroes, you've got really funny actors, you've got really emotional actors, but trying to get one that covers all those. And just one of my heroes growing up was, I mean, Will Smith, you know, the Fresh Prince, and you know, he's funny, he's got swagger, he's got attitude, and those are all the things we wanted from Lance, because a character like Lance could be very unlikable very quickly. You know, he's very confident, which if it goes too far becomes unlikable. Arrogant, exactly. He needs to be able to be funny about it, but not look stupid because he's your hero. And Will was just the one guy who was like, oh, it'd be so great if Will Smith would do this, but that'll never happen. And then we pitched Will, and he said yes, which was crazy. Spies was really great. We got all of our first choice actors, which is a very rare thing to sort of get, especially from actors of the scale of like a Will Smith. But I mean, I try not to get starstruck, but I remember the day we were pitching, it's like we were on the studio a lot at Fox, and we were in a theater, and we had our PowerPoint presentation with our artwork and feeling really good. It's like, just Will Smith. He's just a guy like every other person. He puts his pants on one leg at a time. And we're standing in the theater, and then out in the hallway, you just hear that, that laugh. And I felt my legs go a little wonky. Oh no. It's like, just don't pass out. But he was really great, very gracious, and very aware of the effect Will Smith walking into a room has on people. And he just asked really intelligent questions. He really wanted to know who the character was and what the journey was, and wanted to know that we knew who they were. And we had a great conversation, and it worked out really well. And then Walter was the hardest character to cast in Spies in Disguise. Because you kind of knew who we wanted. We ended up getting Will, which was huge. We kind of knew who all the other characters, but Walter was a really tricky one because he's super smart, but that can sometimes become very cold, right? Someone who's very intellectual, and then he's very warm-hearted and you use the word naive, but it's more just innocent to the world, which can then become, if it goes the wrong way, it can look foolish, or they can look like ignorant, which is a really hard thing. How do you have someone who's innocent to the world but super smart at the same time? Those are sort of sitting on opposite ends of a seesaw, which is a really hard line to walk. So we had a really hard time trying to find, like, we found some people we were looking at who sounded really smart, but then felt very cold. And we found some people who felt innocent, but then you go, but I don't believe them saying science stuff. And then I was just sitting at my desk, and someone in the office next to me was playing something. I was like, what? Who was that? And I ran over, and they were playing the trailer for Civil War. And I'm like, that's him. That's what. And he just got an ability. It's just, again, there's people like Will and Tom have just a charisma. There's, those people you meet where you go, wow, I just really like that person. I'm not even sure why I like those people. They just have an innate charisma about them. Poor Tom though was like, you picked the wrong actor for a scientist, because he had to say all these really big scientific sounding words, and he was just like,
I can
oh.
imagine that could be tricky.
I want to know, does biodynamic concealment actually exist?
You know, and the reality of all the things they talk about, they all are real scientific terms. Some of it's just on a molecular level. We take it to a much bigger space. But that part of it was also when we were talking about truth, right? Finding a truth, like, you can make up a bunch of words, but if they don't feel like they anchor to anything, people don't believe it, right? Like, so finding actual scientific terms and using them in a generally appropriate way, you can say them with a confidence. You go, I don't know what that means, but I believe it, right? And that becomes the key. But when it gets too crazy and it doesn't feel like it anchors to anything, then you go, I don't know what they're talking about, and it doesn't make sense. So those are all real scientific terms. We've just stretched the capabilities of what science can actually accomplish.
Cool. Rachel, you are correct. Tom Holland is British, and but Troy, that was you made that decision that he would not
Yeah.
use his actual accent as Walter.
Yeah, we did, because again, you know, the Brits already have Bond. You know, we were making our sort of American agent in an American agency, and so at one point we were thinking of using Tom's English accent, because you can have people from different countries be part of like the CIA, let's say, but to the point where we're saying where Walter felt sheltered and innocent, it felt like he couldn't be too worldly. If he'd been from England and found his way to America, well, that's a huge life experience. That opens you up to a lot of things, where we wanted him to feel like his world had been fairly narrow for a long time. So it ended up making more sense that he, you know, grew up in Virginia, which is just down the street from Washington. So you could almost believe he'd been sort of within the same 30-mile radius of his life, his whole life. So he had that little bit of sheltered, I haven't seen the world. Whereas someone like Lance, you feel like he's probably never stayed within the same 30-mile radius of anything his entire life. So that you're always looking for contrast, right? The best movies, you know, Lethal Weapon, these buddy movies always have characters who sit as opposite as they possibly can from each other, because it creates conflict. And for anybody who likes to write stories or is looking for being a storyteller, conflict is your fuel. That's what moves everything forward. Now, conflict can be a really good bad guy, but conflict can also be your heroes. It's just Buzz and Woody, right? Conflict, right? It's just about having something, you know, somebody who wants and somebody who doesn't, and then having different opinions of the best way to get that. That's what turns one scene into the next scene and keeps people watching to see how it turns out.
Contrast between the characters, you mean?
Yep.
So I remember seeing a movie called The Heat with Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy, two totally different characters having to work together.
Yeah, one of the funniest dinner scenes ever. Is
that, I love that. Where
Sandra Bullock and Melissa McCarthy's family.
And the guy with the Boston accent was asking, "Are you a knack?"
Knack? What?
I'll ask again. Are you or are you not a knack? I almost fell out of my seat laughing at that scene. I love it.
It's so good. Yeah.
So Troy, you've obviously had great success in pitching scripts to any goals, or not goals, but helpful tips that you can help with our development team to getting to yes.
Getting to yes. It's honestly, it's preparation, right? Being confident. So if you're prepared, you feel confident in the material you're pitching, and you feel confident in yourself. I get nervous every single time. Like I'd like to say that goes away, and maybe for some people it doesn't, but I am not a person who loves speaking in front of, like, I'm always impressed with all of you when I go to the theater and you're up at the front introducing a movie. I'm like, but then ironically, my job is standing in front of hundreds of people doing just that daily, but every single time it just feels like an unnatural for me personally, but it's something. So I force myself to do it, right? I force myself to do it because I don't like it, but I know I need to. So now I can do it. I still have that feeling like I don't want to do this, but it doesn't stop me anymore like it used to. So practice, preparation, and feeling confident in the material. Because if you feel confident about what you're talking about, that passion wins through. Like if you're excited about something, like people, like just the energy, you'll go like that kid loves whatever they were talking about. Like you know, my kids will talk about a video game. I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying, but I know you love it. I know you love it. And that is a huge thing, because when, depending on who you're pitching, for me, it's a difference between yes and no. So when I'm pitching because I want someone to give me lots of money to make something, because I don't have lots of money. So my job is fear mitigation, if that makes sense, right? Because if you have something and someone says, give me that, I'll take care of it, you're going to be very nervous to hand that over unless you believe that person. So, oh, I'm getting feedback here, sorry.
You're echoing.
Hello. So yeah, so if you have confidence, you believe in it, then everyone else goes, oh, all right. They either go, I believe in it because they do, or they can even say, I don't understand it, but they seem to know it, so I'm going to let them do it. So I'd say confidence, preparation, passion, if you have those, and then practice. If you're ever wondering, just again, same with writing, have people around you who you trust, who you're not afraid of looking a little foolish in front of sometimes, and practice. Just say, I'm going to pitch you something. Because there was the Tonight Show. No one here knows Johnny Carson, I'm sure. But well, okay, well, there's maybe a couple. But does anybody know who was before Johnny Carson?
Steve Allen?
Jack Parr.
Jack Parr.
Jack Parr, I heard about him.
So there's a great story about Jack Parr, who before the cast, because they do it live, in the morning, he would tell someone a joke. And they would say that and he would tell it to anybody, the guy sweeping the floors, the director in the booth. And every time he told a joke, it'd be a little bit different, because he'd tell the joke and see what someone reacted to. And he'd tell it again and say, okay, they laughed. You make small adjusts. Every time you do it, you realize, okay, if I talk a little faster here, people lean in. If I hold my breath and then hit them, they jump. So again, it's practice. It's getting used to the rhythms of something, is also, because it's performative. When you're pitching, you're performing, you're selling.
Excellent. But Kenny, do you have a question? Santiago, just one. I'll get to you right after Kenny. Kenny, do you have a question?
I do. When you do a film in a foreign country, you have to get permission from? Because I know when they do foreign films, they have like credits like permission was granted by so and so, and the Barron Convention, and
you always you were in a constant making.
How do you do that?
Always need permission. That's usually the producer's job.
Oh, okay.
So the producer will work. So if you're doing live action, the producer will work with location scouts to procure permits. Like if you're going to shoot in Times Square, you don't just take your camera and go shoot in Times Square. You have to get permits to have equipment there and get the rights to do it. If you're going to be, I'm Canadian, so when I would come down to LA to work, I'd need to make sure I had my visa and my permits set up so that I was legally able to do that. One of the actors in my current movie is English, but he's living in San Francisco, so working on an American project, so we have to make sure the permits are there so he can do it. So you always have to just be prepared, and that's the producer's job, to make sure that everyone's covered off.
Excellent. Santiago?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned Asterix, the cartoon character from France. I think it's from France, is it?
Belgium, yeah.
Yeah. I know the creator, his name is not the creator, but the drawer, the person who drew is Alberto Uderzo.
Yeah.
Uderzo.
Yeah.
And also the writer is René Goscinny. I heard of Asterix. I've read Asterix so many times. I love that comic strip.
Yeah.
I've read it so many times. I grew up with him and all that stuff. Because I'm also an artist. I like to draw. I draw a lot.
Yeah.
So I mostly draw portraits. Sometimes draw caricatures too. Sometimes I draw caricatures and things like that.
Yeah,
and I'm into all the animation, comics, and things like that.
Heyo for me was a big one. The Smurfs, right? And
If
all you know is the Hanna-Barbera like TV show Smurfs, read the original Smurfs comics. They were very different characters. They were troublesome little imps. But again, I would read those little books and I draw all those characters, and that's how I got started.
Do you know who Corto Maltese is, the famous Italian comic book character?
Sounds familiar, but I can't place.
Created by Hugo Pratt from Italy.
Sorry,
Hugo Pratt from Italy. He created Corto Maltese.
Oh no, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of names out there. I don't know. There's so many I don't know either. Like,
but
I know. I studied all these artists, and I saw all their names on the internet, and I just like it's so hard to remember all of them. It's so hard.
know.
I know
But
so
you can-
many out,
but
so
you
many out
gather all
there.
that, you gather all that reference and inspiration. That's great.
So, quick, before, Cubby had two more just regarding, it sounded like, did Tom or Will do any ad-libbing, that you ended up keeping in the movie?
Huge. Yes. Tom will not read the same a line the same way twice, no matter how much you beg him. I mean, that's not true. He will, but like Tom will always take a line and he'll find a different way around it. But that's what you want. Like I said, animation, we have to plan everything. So it can become very, very boring and unspontaneous, right? You don't typically get a lot of those happy accents you get in a live action movie. Like I'm sure you've heard stories of, like, Harrison Ford was sick one day and he was supposed to have a big sword fight and said he just pulls his gun and shoots the guy in Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? Like, I'm not doing that. And you're like, even better than the fight scene that was planned. If you've ever seen American Graffiti, there's this great shot where he rides up to the diner and he goes to get off his moped and the moped goes and it smashes into. That was not planned. It just wouldn't stop. So, but they capture those in film. So it's really hard to create that in animation because you're creating everything. So the one place you get spontaneity is with the actors. So we'd like to work, like I really like to work with actors who like to improvise. Not every actor likes to improvise. Tom does. Will did this one scene. We had it all written and all planned, and we did a run through it, and it was good. It was good. And then we broke for lunch and we were having lunch with him, and he got up and he just started acting it out. And luckily one of his friends had his cell phone. He filmed it all because we got it. And he just went on this riff and ended up sort of acting out the whole scene at lunch. And we went back and we rebuilt the scene based on that. Because it was just a better idea. It was a more natural idea of the same scene. So they will totally do it. Other actors, though, they want their lines. They want to know how to say it. They don't want to go off of it. Everyone has a different way of working, and you just have to respect that. And
the actors study their roles extensively when they're working on a project.
Yeah,
they understand their characters, more than most people on the film.
They have to. That's how they make them real.
And lastly, he asked if there were any scenes that you loved that you had to cut, and if so, what were they?
There's one. I'm not sure if they put it on the DVD as an extent. There's one scene. If anybody who knows Spies, there was one scene where at one point Joyless, got kidnapped by one of the drones. There was a whole different storyline, and we shot it, and it was really creepy and wonderful, and we would shoot through all this crystal glass. It was really, really great, and it had a really fun sort of jump scare in it, and it was great. But it was a storyline that ended up falling to the wayside. We had that all the way through, and it was lit. It was all done, but the movie tells you what it wants to be and what it doesn't want to be, and so that fell by the wayside. So that was one that was sad, that we were like, couldn't use that. But there's always those things you fall in love with, and you have to be very cautious to say, am I trying to wedge this in here because I just love it, or is it because it's right for the movie? Like, what are you fighting for? And sometimes you have to realize you have to let things that you love go because it's better for the whole. The individual pieces you love, but it doesn't fit in the whole. So, yeah.
Does anyone else, Mr. Zachary, have any questions?
I had a comment I wanted to, because what you were saying earlier on about all the amount of people that went into making the movie, that's one of the reasons when I'm sitting in a movie theater, I'll watch the credits, because just to appreciate how many hundreds of people it takes to make a movie. It's not just actors and animators and the people who make the music. There's can be upwards of thousands of people.
Yeah,
you don't necessarily think about that when you're watching the movie.
No, and that's a great point. That's one thing I think a lot of filmmakers are thankful to Marvel for, regardless of certain filmmakers' opinions of Marvel movies, is that they put these little Easter eggs at the end. So now you get people who will stay through all the credits and go, wow, there's a lot of people who made that movie. But yeah, it is always great. It's funny in certain places, like if you watch a movie in France, if you get up before those credits and they boo you and throw things, like they really do, because they're like, you're disrespectful to the craftsmen who put in. So it's funny to see how different people react in different cultures to sitting and watching the credits. But yeah, when you watch those, you realize just how many people go into making one of those things. It's a lot.
So what's on your horizon? And for Blue Sky Sea, Nimona is it
Nimona-
2022?
Yep, Nimona's 2022. So that's our next
It won't
project
be
up.
delayed.
Here's hoping our date sort of keeps us outside of the but I mean right now I'm sure you guys are aware that all the studios are shuffling their distribution schedules, so we'll find we don't find out that stuff till you guys typically find out about that stuff, but hopefully all this craziness that we're all living in right now is settled down enough that people can get back to the theaters, and we're good for January 22. We'll be done the movie for then, so it's just a matter of when they want to release us. So we'll be done the movie later this year.
Right. Well, we're all going to stay positive and hope for
Yes.
that. And
Yeah.
It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a beautiful movie. It's got a lot of really fun comedy and adventure and heartfelt moments and really solid messages that I think it would be good for the soul for where we are right now. So just of acceptance and not judging people at a glance or for what you assume they have to offer, but really seeing.
absolutely. Well, I loved the to me, the takeaway when I reading about Lance and Walter is that, learning to work together as a team. So I love that. And that's what we do together every day. Right, everybody?
That's
Right.
what we do, yeah.
Chris?
Yep. Yeah.
Section 9 and 10.
Yes.
Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion.
That's right.
That's
First I
true,
found
Zach.
from the BIB alley.
Yeah, this is a great thing. My grandmother always used to say, "Many hands make light work."
And that's true. And that's true. Troy, cannot thank you enough for joining us
Thank you.
and answering so thoroughly all these questions. It was absolutely amazing.
Very
And
informative.
you really, so many takeaways from this. So thank you too for,
Thank you so much.
yeah, it was amazing. And you are
Thanks, Troy.
family here. So it's, and you live locally,
I do.
which
Yeah,
is,
I live in
that's-
Ridgefield. Yeah.
Yes.
Yay. So,
Yeah.
so
we love the Prospector. We're
yeah, we
They're
greatly
awesome, so.
appreciate your time, your talent, your expertise, and sharing it with us. So it's
I really appreciate
been
it.
a pleasure, a gift. So thank you so much. And I hope
Thank you.
we all hope you are all you and your family are all safe and well and continue to be.
Yes. Thank you. And you too. I hope everyone stays safe and stays healthy.
Thank
and
you.
Will do.
Thank you.
Will do.
thank you very much. And thanks for letting me come by and visit. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
please,
Anytime.
please. Yes, yes. Expect to see some popcorn come your way. So
Awesome. Well, we'll see you. We'll see you in the movies. We'll see you in the theater.
yes, absolutely. Can't wait.
Definitely.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
All right,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.